Welcome, welcome, welcome to Excited About Entheogens, the talk show where mystical curiosity meets clinical chaos, where spirit meets science and the weird gets wonderfully wise. I am your host, Lianna Tullis-Robinson, the guide, the question asker, and your co-conspirator in curiosity. And I'm inviting you into a space where downloads are sacred, rituals are real, and altered states aren't that weird once you get to know them. You may leave this episode feeling a little bit deranged, and if you do, welcome to the family. We are opening season 1 with a topic that doesn't get nearly enough airtime, but affects everything. I'm talking about spiritual hygiene. Because let's be real, you wash your ass every day. You brush your teeth. You tend to your body. And yet, we move through people, spaces, emotions, systems, and ceremonies without nearly the same vigilance for the energetic exchanges we're constantly absorbing and emitting. And that imbalance can catch up with us. So to tune us in and to set the foundation for this season, I am beyond honored to welcome Natasja Pelgrom. Welcome to the talk show, Natasja.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It's lovely to meet you. And this is a very beautiful introduction, I have to say. I love it. The bridging of many ways of knowing is my favorite topic. And speaking about spiritual hygiene is something that is needed in the world. So thank you for bringing it forth.
Yes, and thank you for your knowledge and all of the wisdom that you bring and that you will bring to this conversation. You know, when I looked at your website and I read your bio, and I saw that you have held hundreds, if not over or up to 1,000 ceremonies for folks. You cannot displace that type of knowledge and wisdom. That is lived experience that you may not necessarily just receive from reading a book.
Nope. Books do one thing. They feed the mind, but ceremony and holding space for others is a metaphysical and somatic experience. So, you know, the mind is just one little tiny part in the equation of coming into the acknowledgement of what it means to hold space, right?
You can't only approach the practice of spiritual hygiene from an intellectualizing space.
No, absolutely not. There is good to have like a basic understanding. If you have, it depends a little bit on your teacher or maybe what kind of tradition you are tapping into that will teach you about spiritual hygiene. A lot of wisdom traditions don't speak or explain. It's a lived and breathing experience as an apprentice where you sit over and over and over and suddenly something clicks somatically through the physical understanding or through the vision in an expanded state where things start to make sense. And that takes time. It's sometimes years. What I personally am very passionate about is how can we bridge that understanding with also our need for a mind to understand, right? We live in a society where a mind needs to come along too. So what I love doing is actually going, and this is a talent, a natural talent, is understanding patterns. And when you understand patterns, you can understand the anatomy of something. It's the same thing, you know, when I'm talking to my bookkeeper, I love the Excel spreadsheets that he creates. I love it. And you have to see the energetic realm as the same thing. You know, you have to structure, you have to understand when we put a sum in place and where and what the consequences is of what we're doing. So the anatomy of something is when you fully can understand what is happening, and then you can actually simplify it for another person. So it gets out of the woo-woo space. Woo-woo is not it. This is not woo-woo.
Exactly, right? Because whether or not maybe you have a belief system that aligns with spiritual practices, the fact of the matter is we're all interacting with each other every day. And those interactions are moving into different spaces means that we should probably be accountable for how we're entering into them. And I like how you shared that it's not necessarily woo-woo. Maybe spiritual hygiene is simpler than we're really making it. Maybe we have a tendency to complicate it.
100%. I totally agree. We'd have a tendency to complicate a lot of things as humans. I think a lot of things are much simpler. And of course, I mean, our emotions in the society that we're living in is very complex, living, breathing systems. But the way we can relate can be sometimes very simple. But we don't want simple all the time. Sometimes we want
Mm,
complex. Sometimes we want a challenge. And for whatever reason, our wounding or our desires or whatever reason, we pick those things apart. But yeah, it is, I think it's very simple. And I think if you look at maybe your elders, grandparents, or people that are caretakers, of one generation back or even two generations back, from whatever lineage you come from, there are certain practices that were naturally already there that you
mm,
completely dismissed as a child, but they were part of spiritual hygiene. They were part of understanding the relational space, especially for like myself growing up in Portugal, an agricultural environment, and my grandmother having a Catholic background. There was still some earth-based wisdom tradition from Portugal that was seeping
mm,
through the religion, right? And one of the things was the first thing she did in the morning was put her head in a, how do you call that? I am Dutch, but and my English is really, really well, but I sometimes skip, my brain skips.
oh,
I think it's perimenopause too. But but she used to put like a scarf, that's the word, a scarf on her head and wake up in the
yeah.
morning. And what would she do? Broom the house.
Mm,
Okay, so that makes sense in terms of preparing the house and making the spaces clean. But energetically, it's like the night has passed. What has been let go energetically needed to
mm,
move out. Much later in years, in my late teen years, she explained to me certain practices. And interesting enough, from certain Caribbean practices, I've seen the
mm.
women doing exactly the same thing, but we completely discard it. So it's sometimes spiritual hygiene is when you see your elder doing something, you dismiss it because, oh, she's just cleaning or she's just putting on a candle because it's getting dark. No, there are
Mm.
certain understandings that are not explained in that way. And that's part of acknowledging the interconnectedness with life and therefore the spiritual hygiene with it.
Yes. And isn't it so beautiful to also contextualize spiritual hygiene as cultural and ancestral and intergenerational,
Yeah.
right? Because we never stand alone as an island. And so when we are practicing spiritual hygiene, yes, it's things that we do for ourselves, but also it is interpersonal. And perhaps one of the first spaces where we come into contact with spiritual hygiene and its practices is with our family and our culture.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes there is a lot more there than we thought there was.
Mm,
Like I just named with my grandmother, it's so much later that I clicked on certain things because of my more than a decade now, 13 years of dedicating my life to and with living in ceremony in the broadest sense
mm,
of the word, right? Is through my own practices and my own understanding and my own studies, I went back to my lineage. It's now with the age of 46 that I go to a Catholic church, not because I'm connected to one specific religion. I'm,
mhm.
I'm connected to God in this most sovereign way, and this is my belief system. But it's really beautiful to connect to where I came from, what my practices were with prayer, what my practices were with the communion with my grandparents, and
Mhm.
prayer has been with me in every walk of life and in every tradition that I was ever privileged to receive wisdom from. Prayer is the common denominator. And music and community and certain practices around with water, right? Every
Yeah.
tradition has a relationship to and with water. So for me, it's what exact in your introduction where you said spirit meets science. It's where we see where is our universal connection, where do we overlap, where it becomes our human experience into the sacred.
Mm.
and where it becomes our birthright to connect beyond our ethnical background or the land that we are living on, but just
Mm,
as a human being, our birthright to connect to water, fire, earth, wind, prayer, offering. This is
mhm.
part of all of our lives, bridging it back, part of actually spiritual hygiene in a way.
Like, there are so many opportunities for us to engage in spiritual hygiene outside of us that are already naturally provided by nature. And it's so interesting when you bring up prayer, because prayer is something that I do religiously, but spiritually, right? But it's something that really brings me so much calm, so much inner peace, and so much balance to just speak to the ever presence, because I always feel like I am heard. And what's peculiar, or I guess perhaps unique, is that I never actually grew up in a family where prayer was normalized, or where people always engaged in prayer, even as like a spiritual hygienic practice. So it makes me wonder, perhaps even outside of like our immediate relationships, where else do you feel like people get those little nuggets of spiritual hygienic practices? Because I wonder if sometimes maybe the things that we learn on how to cleanse spiritually aren't always necessarily accurate, or it's just capitalism hidden.
Great question. I love what you're just saying. Okay, so I'm going to give an example about what we see in the world right now, what apparently spiritual hygiene is, or the way we dress our environment, which is performative.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So let's talk about you just shared off camera that you're from New York. I'm based in Amsterdam. We have a relationship, the two cities, but so both cities have really beautiful yoga schools. We
Mm,
all can relate to that. And we come in and we really feel like, oh, this is so pretty. There is a stone in the corner. There is some sage here. There is, a certain atmosphere. It's the color beige, the color, like everything is aesthetically beautiful. I love beautification. Beautification is a very important thing of honoring spirit in the
mm,
right way. Working with flowers, honor cleaning your environment. Beautification is a way of saying the abundance of life and the earth, what it gives us. So I'm not
mm,
dismissing beautification, but that aesthetic, which is what you're speaking into, the capitalistic way of looking at it, is not necessarily one-on-one spiritual hygiene. If you don't do an action, and this is the basic understanding of ritual, if you don't do an action with actually knowing from a physical body with intention and attention what is happening,
mm,
what are you holding? If I just had a fight with my partner and I am a yoga teacher and I step into the thing and I do some smudging because that's what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not regulated my nervous system, smudging it's a beautiful smell, you
mm,
know?
mhm,
But it's the person that is doing it has to hold a certain kind of reverence, discernment, understanding, has to the ability to self-regulate, and then have a really deep relationship with honoring what is actually the herb that I'm touching.
mhm,
Sage is, an amazing herb for everybody to use, or rosemary is a very abundant. But Palo Santo, which I have here, is a tree that takes very, very long time to grow.
mhm,
And it's a tree that needs to have a lot more attention on its sustainability. So just cutting down the tree is you're literally cutting down of generations just for your smudge in your yoga practice. Right. So be
mm,
discerning when you use what, how you use it, understand the background of what you're actually doing, so it doesn't become another commodity. And so the basics is relational space. How are you relating to that, what you're doing? So that's number one. So if I'm just stepping in and I do blah, 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 while I just have a fight, nothing's happening. Literally,
mm,
nothing. You're actually coming in with a dysregulated nervous system, and people are going to be annoyed by your teaching because your voice is going to be high up and they don't even
mm.
know it. So it's all subconscious messaging. It's all the field that you're weaving yourself and other into. Now, one of my teachers, and I've had the privilege to study within the Hopi Native American tradition for quite some years, in
Wow.
Elk,
Uh-huh.
the medicine song. And just to rectify, we have spoken about entheogens and psychedelics. They don't serve expanded states of consciousness with plants. So it's not that avenue that I've learned that from. But she said, grandmother medicine song said, never give your power away to brother Google. So what does she mean? which is,
Ooh.
if you have a dream, go meditate and ask what the symbols mean to you, right?
Mm.
If you have a power animal that shows up in your practice, don't look it up on, ChatGPT, what that could mean. Go and sit and ask the spirit of the animal, what are you here for? What is our relationship? What is your name? You have certain processes you go into, right? And the third thing is certain tools for ritual, which are then used, and I'll circle back to what you said for spiritual hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
Certain tools need to be given or found.
Mm.
So it's the
Wow.
same thing as, the student is, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And
Mm-hmm.
because we have Uber Eats and we have everything on demand, Netflix and everything, our sex life is on demand, our movies are on demand, our food is on demand, everything is on demand, we expect that our spiritual growth is the same way on demand. This is where the
Mm.
capitalistic way of looking at it happens. But true teachings, when it comes to relationship to and with spirit, in the most discerning and in integrity, things will unfold in divine timing. Your job is to keep yourself clean, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, right? To receive its message when you're needed, to trust the breadcrumbs towards on your path, to surrender
Mm.
to that. I had a relationship with a plant. It's called the sacred tobacco plant, not the ones I still have, not the cigarettes, but the real sacred plant where you make offerings with, work and ceremony with. And I received
Mm-hmm.
a vision about 15 years ago from this plant. And I had a really deep calling to work with the plant, but I didn't know how. I didn't have anybody in my surrounding that could teach me anything about it. Until about, I think it was about 5 to 6 years later, the same teacher, grandmother medicine song, and I was about to step into a year teaching on a specific topic. And I said, I actually really feel the call to work with tobacco plant. And then she said, like, okay, I'm going to dream about it and ask the spirit if it's time for us to step into that. So you see, there is a time and a place and a teaching that comes forth, and then the path will expose itself. It literally took about 10 years before I actually smoked my own pipe to work with a tobacco spirit in ceremony. 10 years I waited for that
Mm.
moment and that aha, and every little seeming thing just stepped in front of each other and I just walked the path. So
Mm-hmm.
to just circle back, and I'll wrap this answer up, is um, tools need to be gifted or found. So what you see behind me, you see here an owl wing.
Wow. Uh-huh.
You see that? So I found this. The owl had just died in front of my feet when I was walking the dogs in Portugal. And
Oh
then
my
I
gosh.
ceremonially did a shamanic ritual for 7 days. And there is a whole process around it to work to extract certain parts of the animal, and then the animal connects to you and all of that. But it was literally offered. It was
Yes.
literally offered on my path, right? So that's the gift. So you wait. And so, long story short, don't buy a feather online.
Uh-huh.
Right? You will find them on the street from pigeons and other animals. Go for a walk every week in the woods. You'll find it will be on your path. Pay attention, listen deeply, collect those feathers, and then make your own wand. That is a powerful
Mm.
energetic tool because it was in relationship to you and spirit and life and nature. And then it actually holds power, not the online Etsy feather. That's can be beautiful,
Mm.
can be the most beautiful thing. But this is where I believe your question, and it weaves into spiritual hygiene as well.
Oh, that was amazing, Natasha. Thank you so much. Well, because you shared so much of, and you really explained many thoughts that I have, but you put them into such like a seamless formation of words there. Like the first point that an aspect of spiritual hygiene, and we talked about this just a little bit, I think, before I hit record, is not necessarily the aesthetic of self-care,
Yeah.
right? So it's like we talk about self-care and you can like get a candle and take a bath and do a cleanse. And that's absolutely fine. But another layer of spiritual hygiene and self-care is to actually have that intrinsic wisdom to know how to regulate your nervous system. And that comes from years of practice in and of itself, because you first need to know, what is my nervous system reacting to? How am I reacting to it? Where did that come from? What is at the core? And how can I recognize when my nervous system is out of whack? Take a step back and then practice my rituals, my cleansing, behaviors or things that I do to help me to feel more grounded. And I feel like that is what needs to come first and foremost, especially when you are in a space where someone else may have things that come up from their body and their vessel and their psyche that will dysregulate them.
Yeah.
So I feel here like you bringing up that the additional layer to spiritual hygiene is knowing how to self regulate before you even step into the space is actually true accountability. And the other aspect where you talk about how tools will show up for you, that is mint. That
I guess it
is
happened to you.
well, yes. Well, things like that do happen to me where I find things, or what I'll say is, let's say maybe I will go like thrifting or something, and I will set the intention like, ancestors, if there's anything that you would like here, I'll buy it for you. Just let me know if there's something that you would like.
Yeah.
So, and I bring it home and I cleanse it, things like that, because you never particularly know where it's come
Yeah.
from. But you can even set that intention to say, like, I will go out for a walk, I'll be out and about. If there's a flyer that you like, Most High Divine, I would be happy, to stop and to smell it and to give presence to my life. So
Mm-hmm.
there are so many additional layers to spiritual hygiene where, yes, it's like your behaviors, but it's regulation and also the acceptance of surrendering to divine timing. And that when you are stepping into your spiritual self, you cannot necessarily expect for everything to be on demand for you, which is really what our culture teaches us.
100%. And this is where, if I can add an addition to what you're just saying is,
Mm-hmm.
is spiritual hygiene is the how you tend to your inner ecosystem. So
Mm.
there are multiple things. Why is that needed? So you don't leak, project, contaminate, and collapse.
Wow. Leak, leak. I'm
Leak,
gonna write that. Project.
leak, project, contaminate, and collapse, especially
Mm,
if you're sensitive, intuitive, or you work with others. Now, working with others, let's bring this to a really wide lens, because when you're in the boardroom or you're a finance manager, you're working with others, you're in dynamic with others, you're in an ecosystem, which is a family constellation. It's a
mm,
mirror of your own, where you come from as well. So I just want to say, working with others does not necessarily need to be a coach or a therapist, or like, we all are consistently working
yes.
with others, right? So if emotional hygiene is about feelings, right? Mental hygiene is about what kind of thought patterns are coming up. So
Mm,
the ability to regulate your feelings is not about never having feelings, or being superior to rage. No, please don't.
mm,
Let rage be there. Let grief be there. Let anger be there. Let resentment be there. So it's about
yes.
understanding why you're having it, right? And how you can regulate those feelings. It's not about not having them anymore. And I think this is a bit about the bypassing in personal development and spiritual realm that happens, that suddenly we're above these feelings. No, absolutely not. They become
Mm,
shadow aspects. But I'm diverting now. But so spiritual hygiene is then really about what you absorb, what you carry, and what you confuse as yours,
mm-hmm.
and what you fail then to clear. So, for people that are, for example, already fluent in energetic language, I would say spiritual hygiene is an ongoing practice of distinguishing yourself really from a field, right? So, it's also like the intuition from impulse and guidance from your unmet needs. This is really
Mm,
important to understand, because a lot of the times we get enmeshment.
yes.
Right? We get enmeshment. And especially when people I've learned that the outer world is not safe. Those people are a lot of the times amazing empaths and amazing intuitive because they've had to develop a skill to be able to be extrasensory on the environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is that there are also counter actions that come in, which is pleasing, lack of boundary, right? So then suddenly intuition can become an impulse. And the strongest way to work with intuition from a place of maturity is the ability to wait,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
observe, right? And it's not that we need to go into this perfection of always being able to do that. We go back and forth, right? We also don't have consistently regulated nervous systems. Your nervous system is supposed to be dysregulated. That's what it's doing. That's its
Exactly.
job.
Yes. How
You know?
often do you hear people actually say that? Your nervous system is actually made to dysregulate or to regulate itself.
It's like an
And so there's
antenna.
there's never going to be this extended time period for 6 months because you did ayahuasca that your nervous system is just fully regulated and you're this like fully balanced all the time type of being.
No, I had to. I mean, if anybody knows Amsterdam, we go on bikes here, and I was the other day, and I was daydreaming, and I was on little bit on the wrong side of the street. I was a bit like daydreaming, and someone passed me and really yelled at me with swearing words, and
Oh.
literally my body just felt like like the verbal energetic hit. I really was shocked, and I was like almost like, "Mom," like I felt really said like help, because I just came out of the blue, and I was my head. Well, that's where my nervous system starts peaks for a moment, right? That
Mhm.
happens. We're in transport. We're in a city. It's normal. It's that what's supposed to do that. I'm not. You cannot be consistently regulated the whole time in that way.
Mm. And isn't that so self-compassionate? Like that releases the responsibility, like, okay, the perfectionism, okay, I need to be on top of it every single time. I got dysregulated. That means something about me. Honestly, I'm probably sharing more so of my internal dialogue, to make sure that others can
Yeah,
relate to me in like, from an authentic space. Sometimes there's this worry, like, oh gosh, I got so dysregulated. What does that mean about, my connection to all things? What does that mean about me as a spiritual person? And so when you share that, I feel like a weight lifts off my shoulders because, from an angle of self compassion, you cannot always be regulated in your nervous system. It's really about the journey inward and the
yeah,
journey back to the core to say, where did that come from? How can I process it? I am safe. Everything is well, so that you can return to the presence or return to the present and not, as you shared, leak and then project it onto the next person. You rode your bike maybe to the grocery store, and then you get mad at the person who's standing in line in front of you. Then
yeah,
you're contaminating the energy of the grocery store, and you probably at the end don't feel much better about it. So
yeah.
I love how you shared that process of um, when people or how people can identify that maybe they need to re regulate the leak, the project, contaminate, and collapse.
Yeah. And if you want, I can go a little bit deeper on how this looks emotionally, relational, and physical, for example, and energetically.
Definitely. Yes.
Okay, but before I do that, I want to just share, what is really good to do is to actually take time to pick up spot in nature. And if you're in a city, go to a park and pick one spot. And let that be your spot where you alchemize. And what do I mean with that? Let that be your spot where you observe everything and you take it every time, when you're just in that honeymoon phase falling in love. Or maybe
Mm.
for those of you who really appreciate a good glass of really good wine, you're savoring that moment. You want to
Mhm.
take everything in. Bring that same kind of taking that everything in that spot in nature. And go back every time again to that same spot and start observing the changes. Start observing what are the creepy crawlers there? What is the tree doing? Who is actually living in the tree? What are the leaves doing when you're doing there? Now, so the other day I was holding a private ceremony and I was in Portugal.
Mhm.
And we were at the end of this ceremony, and this lady that was with me, we were sitting outside, and actually it was really a beautiful sunset. It was a beautiful sunset. We were sitting outside, and we started to look at this ant, and there was
Mhm.
this ant, carrying half of another ant. And, you know,
Okay.
it's like, so another ant got probably damaged or something had happened, and this other ant was carrying half of the body, and they were chucking along, and we were observing that behavior. And it's not like the ant that had half of the body was dismissing itself or saying, "Oh my God, you always do this to yourself. You have half a
Hmm.
body now. How dare
Yeah.
you?" No, you know what it did? It actually got support, because they were
Mm.
part of a whole ecosystem. So they're not alone in it. And one actually grabbed the ant and went back. And, you know, if you know a little bit about ants, how they can carry 10 times its weight, and it's miraculous, these animals. So for me, it's thinking, okay, what do you observe in nature? And how does that metaphor that you're observing can relate to yourself and in your
Mm.
own life? When you were sharing about, you know, oh, I don't have it together and I should be there, or all of us have that. But a flower is not disputing its beauty, right? It's not
Mm.
saying, oh, now I'm letting go of these leaves. I'm now did a shitty job. Did a shitty job.
Yeah.
I'm not shining anymore, you know? So I just wanted to
Uh-huh.
share that, because sometimes going to nature and have nature just be your teacher is the way to, you're doing multiple things. You're actually being in a place of receptiveness, self-awareness, and you're co-regulating with nature, which is the best thing anyway. So
Mm.
I just wanted to share that as a little anecdote and maybe a tip for people. But the common signs of spiritual hygiene when they're out of balance, because I really wanted to share that, because I think it's something that is misunderstood for a lot of people. So on an emotional level,
Hmm.
there is a heightened reactivity that then is framed as truth. So you know that, when there is truth, you don't have to overshout it. Not in your own head, not to a friend. It is just so. But when there is a reactivity framed, there is a more of a oomph to it, right? That's a marker.
Hmm.
Another one is spiritual justification of avoidance or superiority,
Mm.
which is something that is part of, if you dive a little bit deeper on shadow work, it's one of the first things you encounter as parts of superiority to work with. It's amazing to discover about yourself. The other one is swinging between devotion and collapse. And this is what I've seen a lot with people holding space or in service of others' mental, emotional well-being. They have a
Mm.
really heightened devotion to spirit, God, and then after the retreat, they completely collapse, and there is compassion fatigue, which is an actual term within therapy models too. There, it exists.
Hmm.
Compassion fatigue is a real thing. I had it too when I was completely overworked in ceremony. So the relational part. So then there is a relational a sign of spiritual hygiene being out of balance, which is blurred boundaries. I already shared boundaries are extremely important skill to understand, especially when you work with expanded state of consciousness, because as a leader of a space or the main guide, your boundaries in life will be replicated in the energetic realm. So
Mm.
how you hold yourself in your day-to-day life, it's not separate. This is how strong the container will be in terms of energetics and the metaphysical space, what transpires, what comes in and what doesn't, right? So that's really important. Then rescuing dynamics, the savior dynamic,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
Charismatic leakages, eroticism. We've seen this a lot in all these different cults, spiritual movements, psychedelics.
Yeah.
We see it all the
Yeah.
time, right? And then another sign is difficulty receiving feedback. This
Mm.
is why it's really important to connect with people who are not in your echo chambers.
Yes.
Connect with people that have slightly different viewpoints, that would ask you a question that you would not think about. Have peers around that you might not agree with everything, but at least they are ethically doing their part. You don't have
Hmm.
to agree with everything the whole time. That's like, it's fine, but we also don't have to fight about it, right? A
Hmm.
physical aspect of how you can map out the spiritual hygiene is out of balance is exhaustion. It's real. It's a real thing. We already spoke about the nervous system being dysregulated. We don't need to go into it again. But another one is insomnia after
Mm.
powerful experiences. So not having the ability. So when the body actually needs energy to rest, What
Yeah.
I've seen a lot, when spaces are contaminated energetically, people get really sick afterwards, especially facilitators.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
with viruses, sudden strange rashes, eczema, like things. And then the last one is energetically, is when the space is porous. Where when the space is porous, especially in expanded state, you observe it really as people are getting a meshed experience or similar kind of experience, or someone across the room is picking up on someone else's journey and thinking it's
Mm-hmm.
part of their journey, right? So that's one. Picking up on other people's emotions doesn't have to be necessarily something bad, but can you understand that it's other people's emotion and not make it your own, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then another one is the confusion. What I've seen a lot is between channeling and depletion.
Huh. Okay.
When people have the belief system that they're in a place of channeling, but actually it's their ego masquerading themselves in something else. A lot of the time is just our own egoic processes, uh,
Mm-hmm.
in a way. And then chronic openness without integration.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to see that when people are less and less tolerant for certain environments or people. They say, oh, dismiss it like, oh, I'm too sensitive for that, or I'm too sensitive for this, or, so sure, you're sensitive. So what then the antidote to that sensitivity is working on your boundaries and where you're meshing with the space. So chronic openness is really a sign of you need to integrate and maybe step away of your service for a little bit to understand more. So yeah, I hope this is helpful for you, for people watching.
This is going to be helpful for so many people because I have even felt a shift within myself, just even hearing you list out so many examples that I have already seen, things that I
Yeah.
have already witnessed, and things that I have even experienced my own self. You know, one thing that always comes up in my mind when I see a lot on social media for folks who are like in the psychedelic space, folks who hold space for other people, and I feel so, my body physically reacts, and I feel like my spirit reacts when I hear how folks are ingesting, ayahuasca several times a year or like every 2 months, or they've ingested ayahuasca, then a couple of months later they'll try psilocybin, and then when they're back in home in their own space, they'll do something on the weekends with their partner, and I truly wonder about that chronic openness because, as you shared, intuition comes from a place of maturity, which is also patience, so that you can receive those breadcrumbs to know, you know what? Maybe I don't need to open up with the plant medicine again. Let me see what the next breadcrumb is that shows up for me. Let me kind of follow the trail or the journey that I'm being led to so that I can understand more about myself without this, I don't know if I should say obsession, but this high interest in just always cracking yourself open.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes. So, thank you for giving all of those examples because I have seen so many of them. And even when these folks are constantly cracking themselves open, I'm wondering, well, that's not necessarily hygienic because you haven't really done the integration yet from what you experienced from that first plant medicine journey that you just went on. So,
Yeah.
another layer to spiritual hygiene is also tending to the integration process and having that patience.
Yes, beautiful said. Absolutely. And what I'm hearing in between your words, what it reminds me of is the lack of, well, there is this longing to connect to something greater, a greater purpose, a greater meaning, without understanding that you have to walk the integration path. But there is something very dangerous about that. And I think this is what people don't understand when you step into these expanded states and start to mesh in a metaphysical space where you don't have the experience or know-how,
Mm,
is your spiritual sovereignty. We get
mm,
hijacked. So the moment you start a codependent relationship with anything, you putting yourself out of your sovereign being. And our biggest gift, this is my belief system, doesn't have to be anybody else's belief system. I'm just speaking my own truth, how I believe it today, December 2025. In a year time, I might say something else. Okay. I'm allowed to change my beliefs too. I'm a human. But today
Yes.
for me is the biggest experience of divinity is our actual human experience. We don't need dogma or institution or something external to have a connection to and with God, to and with love, to and with nature, right? So the moment we let ourselves go from one catharsism to another catharsism, we're actually saying, I am unworthy. I'm actually, because if you're worthy, if there's real self-love, you would tend to yourself. The same thing you would do to a baby. You would not force feed a baby. You would wait till it screams and shouts and you'll feel into it. And there's an empathic link between the caretaker or the parent, and that's forged. And then, the certain times, and you're not going to give the keys of your Ferrari to that baby, are you? And it's logical, but why are we doing the same thing and bypassing our personal and spiritual development in this absolute obsession and addiction that it comes in? And of course, I mean, the plants itself are not addictive, but our relationship to it, because we are outsourcing our sovereignty. We're outsourcing our worth. We need something external to validate or teach us or tell us or say something, because church is not doing that anymore. So we're putting it with them. And they're not just benevolent beings. They're not.
That exactly.
It's not. You're meshing yourself with many arms of consciousness, many different layers of knowing, and there is duality in all of them. The same as duality in our 3D existence, which is right, wrong, right? Night and day, feminine, masculine, right? So, and I'm not talking about gender, I'm talking about the qualities, right? So for me, the most important one is giving away our spiritual sovereignty, our relationship to God in that way. That's I think the biggest harm that gets done, besides the re-traumatization and being trauma informed and nervous systems and all of those baseline. But for me, the overarching worry is that one, because that's how you get hijacked.
Wow.
That's
Yes.
the hijacking.
Yes, and that hijacking usually is the danger zone. It's the antithesis to the spiritual hygienic practice. Thank you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you.
Because when you're connecting,
Yes.
listen, I'm saying this out of my own personal experience, not because I'm in any shape or form a master at any of it. I am, I'm walking through my own challenges as anybody else, right? And having a relationship to it. But it's a deeper understanding when you're making a choice and what the consequences of those choices are. And sometimes we do this, like that. Sometimes we do that. And then it's like, oops, I made an oopsie. Okay, let me go back again, back on my feet. And those oopsies are fine. And I think that we are, with our humanity, in a really big oopsie.
Yes. Yes. Oh, thank you so much, Natasja. I just want to say that this conversation has been so nourishing for me. And I bet that it will be very nourishing for the audience as well. So thank you so much for every insight that you have provided, every piece of wisdom that you have shared, every list and example that you have given to us today, so that we can make sure that we all maintain and take accountability for our inner sense of balance, and as well for our self-compassionate practices to bring us back to that space of balance before we tend to the other, which is also ourselves.
Yes. I'm just going to put something out there, if you would want. I have a free masterclass on working on your own shadow as part of understanding. So if you want it or provide it to your audience, I can share the link with you. And there is on shadow work, because a lot of it is understanding our unconscious biases. And what do I mean with that? Very simple. My very good friend, Alexander Beiner, he wrote an amazing book, The Bigger Picture. Just want to give credit where credits are due. These are his words. The shadow is the me that I cannot see. And when we say that, it becomes less threatening.
Yes.
Maybe it's helpful for people who are especially space holders or therapists or practitioners, guides who want to deepen a little bit. I have this masterclass for you to hand out.
I will definitely grab that link. Is there anything you'd like to share with the audience on any offerings, services, or ways that folks can connect with you?
Well, there is, for those of you who are interested, because in developing your lifelong learner skills. So, and what do I mean with that? If you're here, it's because you have committed to personal growth, right? And there is a course, a virtual course, a 5-week course called The Fundamentals of Space Holding, where we actually talk about all of these aspects and we go a little bit deeper into them as well, and as teachings. So that's one. I host retreats. There are practitioner retreats. So for people that want to deepen their skills in holding space, either with or without any entheogens. A lot of the people actually come to these retreats that are not necessarily ambitious in holding space with psychedelics or entheogens. They just want to deepen their own skill set. So these are two things that I think will be beautiful for your audience to know. And you can follow me on socials or send me an email or just check out the website, and maybe there will be something else that draws you in. But I think these are the two that most of the time people are most excited about.
Certainly. And I am sure, like, even from as I shared, when I looked at your social media, there was so much that resonated with me. So all of you and anybody in the audience, if you felt like this conversation resonated with you, be sure to check out Natasja Pelgrom's work. And so if there is 5 more minutes, there's actually one question that I ask every single guest at the end of each episode. And so that question is, what makes you so excited about entheogens?
What makes me so excited about that's a good question. Okay, I'm going to be really honest, because that's the only way I can be. That's my Dutch side.
There you go.
I have to speak my truth in a very compassionate way, never to harm anybody, but this is about me anyway, so it doesn't matter. Well, to be really honest, I had a year that I wasn't that excited. And I just had a year where I felt like really saying, I think I'm going to put a nice bow around it, and it's completed. It's completed. So I had a year of being angry with the space, the ecosystem. I've had a year of letting it go. And what has emerged is a beautiful new relationship where it's even more devotional to God. So, and I say the word God as in the all-knowing goddess, God. A lot of us have a lot of trauma actually on that word, but I want to reclaim it as it is. So, and because of my faith has strengthened, because I was willing to drop everything, my relationship to entheogens have been coming into a new place, a new relationship. And I don't know what that new place looks like yet. So I can only give you an honest answer. And I think it's important to also be okay with sometimes not knowing and not having this shiny, oh, it's amazing, it's all of this. No, sometimes it really isn't.
Exactly.
And then you choose, and then you have to choose again. So after more than a decade, I've chosen again, but it's still crystallizing what that is.
Yes. Thank you so much. And that is such a brilliant answer to wrap out this episode. Thank you for that honesty, that intentional response, and the authenticity, because that's what we need to bring into this psychedelic space. And that also presents other people with the sense of comfort that, you know what, I can show up and be honest too. There's no need to bypass. Thank you so much, Natasja. And I'll say here as I close out this episode, that's a wrap on today's journey through the mystical and the meaningful. Thank you so much for tuning in to Excited About Entheogens, and I will see you the next time I open the portal. Goodbye, everyone.